In this video I'm going to show you my progress making a zoa garden and give you 4 tips so that you can make one too. Welcome to Indoor Reef. So I love zoanthids, and ever since I got a tank I'd always loved the way they mesh together and they create these so-called zoa gardens. So for the last 6 months I have been working on making a zoa garden, and today I'm going to show you the progress on this and also go into 4 tips which are going to help you make your own zoa garden. So I've only got a small tank, I haven't got so much space, so I can only make a smaller zoa garden, so I've had to make the ones I do make really count, and all of my corals are growing in really close proximity, which is exactly what happens in the zoa garden. So a lot of these tips that I'm going to share today are also applicable for the rest of the nano tank. Right, so before we get started, like this video, subscribe to my channel and hit the bell. This will mean you're notified of all new videos like this, and importantly you'll get to see my zoa garden grow out. So let's kick it off with number 1, which is contrasting colours. So here's the thing, right, I find if I pick bold colours that contrast well with each other, then my zoas, when put close together, look much better. Now I think this goes for all corals, to be honest, not just zoas, but the closer the corals are together, the more important this is, and there's nowhere where that's more pertinent than within a zoa garden. Sometimes it feels like to get these brighter colours you have to spend a lot more on zoas. Now this can be the case, and some of the more exciting patterned zoas can be a lot more expensive. But some of these ones you see down at the front here I got for as little as £5, £10, £15, and I mean they've grown out a lot more since then, but they were also a lot duller when I bought them, and by putting them in the right environment and a stable tank and feeding them well, actually they've really brightened up, and you can see some of these now. I mean this is under white lighting, but when you get them under the really blue lighting, then they just pop so much. So I'd say paying attention to colours and contrasting colours is so important. Number 2 is leave those zoas alone and let them grow. The temptation with our tanks is always to keep moving things, but I've found with zoas, in fact with most corals, if you just leave them alone and let them grow, then this is when they really settle the most and when they can really thrive and start growing much quicker. And they also get the brighter colours this way that I talked about before, which gives them that great look. I've had times where zoas have just felt like they're not growing at all, and I seem to be just looking at the same 2 polyps forever on a small frag plug. But actually they seem to reach this point that all of a sudden once they've settled they just go boom and they just start growing. And this has been my experience. I mean there are situations where they are just in the wrong place, but if you've got everything right for them, then given enough time I find they will grow like weeds. And number 3 is maintenance. So this point might sound a little bit like it goes against the last one, but what we can find after a while is one particular zoa can be getting quite dominant. It can start overgrowing the other ones. So if we don't manage this, we can very quickly end up with the zoa garden that is being completely overrun with one type of coral. Now, my experience is also that usually the corals that grow the fastest are not the better looking ones. So what I've done is I normally manage them a little bit, so when they really do start getting to the point that I think, you know what, I'm going to lose this coral if I don't do something now, then I will move them apart, or I will potentially frag them a little bit. So for example, I had some hornets right down at the front, and they were completely at risk of being overgrown by these 2 larger colonies. So what I did is just broke the 2 apart a little bit, and this just meant that I could put the hornets somewhere else where they'd really have the space to thrive properly. Now to make this easier, that is where tip number 4 comes in. The 4th and final thing is using loose rocks and frags. The way that using loose rocks and frags makes keeping a zoa garden easier is if you have all of your coral attached to one big piece of rock, when they do start overrunning the other corals, you have to try and either frag it in the tank or try and take the whole rock out, and this can be really disruptive, and it really goes against leaving things just to be stable. And this is going to be an even bigger problem in a big tank. Like in a small nano like mine, it's not so bad to be able to reach in and do things, but it can still get quite fiddly. So by having the zoas on individual rocks and putting some loose rock around them, as they start growing, if you don't like the direction it's going, you can just move that little piece of rock with the coral on to another area of the tank, or you can take that little piece out just to work on that outside the tank. So I think this makes life much easier. And it's actually what I did down at the front here. So where there's these two quite big colonies starting to grow together, I just moved them apart a little bit and put in a frag plug, and you can't even see it at the moment, but it's there just underneath them. And the idea is they'll start growing onto it. So one, they don't grow very well across sand, so zoas will mat out across sand, but I want to give them a surface to grow on, so that was part of the reason. But I could just put one big piece of rock under there, but I decided I'd be better putting these little pieces so that I can move things if I need to. And if I hadn't had my hornets on a small frag plug, I wouldn't have been able to move these when I needed to. So those were my 4 tips on creating a zoa garden. And as you can see, I'm still really early on in this journey with my zoa garden, and I'll continue to share this with you as it develops. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, like and subscribe, and I'll see you again next time on Indoor Reef. So until then, keep it stable, keep it fun, and keep reefing.